Love doesn't always disappear in fiery arguments or slammed doors. Often, it fades without a sound. It slips away quietly, without warning, and before you realize it, something has shifted. You see the same face, hear the same voice, but the warmth is gone. The connection that once felt effortless now feels strained, and you can't quite explain why. People rarely announce that they've stopped loving you. They just stop showing it, not out of malice, but because feelings change. Attention drifts. Hearts move on, not always with anger, but with indifference, and that's harder to face. Have you ever felt utterly alone while standing beside someone you love? As if you're physically there, but emotionally invisible? There's no fight, no final goodbye, just silence and a growing space between what was and what is. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." When someone begins to withdraw, our suffering often comes not from their distance, but from our resistance to it. We cling to how things used to be, while reality drifts further away. Today, we explore a quiet truth. When love begins to leave, it always reveals itself in two ways. Not loudly, not cruelly, but clearly, if you're willing to see it. Let me take you to a quiet village, where one man faced the greatest fear of anyone in love. He learned not through betrayal or arguments, but through silence and emptiness, a lesson sharper than words could ever be. In his story, we'll uncover the two unmistakable signs that someone no longer loves you: the farmer and the falling leaves. In a village nestled between rolling hills and open fields, there lived a humble farmer named Elias. He was a man of simple joys, rising with the sun, tending his land, and returning each evening to the one person who made his labor meaningful: his wife, Liana, his love, his home. Their life wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. Shared glances over meals, quiet laughter in the garden, whispered conversations before sleep. Years passed, and though time aged their faces, Elias believed their hearts remained unchanged. Until one autumn, something shifted. It wasn't a single moment, no fight, no betrayal, just a quiet chill, a colder gaze, shorter replies. He noticed Liana no longer waited by the door. Meals were left on the table without a word. She stopped asking about his day and shared little of her own. At first, Elias told himself she was tired. The seasons were changing. Maybe it was just a passing mood. But as weeks passed, the distance grew. Her eyes wandered. Her thoughts stayed unspoken. He tried to rekindle the warmth, bringing her favorite bread from the market, tending the garden with extra care, even reading aloud the poem she once loved. But her smiles were polite, distant, as if she were watching a stranger play the role of her husband. Elias felt lost. He confided in no one, not the neighbors, not his brother in the next village. Instead, one morning, he packed a small bag and walked into the forest. Deep in the woods, where sunlight barely touched the ground, there lived an old man known only as the Watcher. He wasn't a sage or a priest, just a man who had loved, lost, and chosen solitude. Those who sought him came not for answers, but for perspective. Elias found the Watcher sitting on a wooden bench watching leaves fall. The man said nothing, only motioned for Elias to join him. For a long while, they sat in silence, eyes tracing the slow descent of autumn leaves. Finally, Elias spoke. "I think she no longer loves me, but I can't prove it. She's still there, yet I feel alone." The Watcher nodded. When the wind changes, leaves fall. They don't ask permission. They don't explain. They simply know the season has ended. Elias looked down. "So what do I do? How can I be sure?" The Watcher lifted a brittle leaf. Love doesn't leave with loud footsteps. It leaves in silence, like a leaf. First the edges wither, then the color fades, until finally it breaks away. The signs are always there, but they're whispered, not shouted. He stood and walked to a towering tree at the clearing's edge. "This tree has stood here longer than I've lived. Every year it lets go, not with anger, not with sorrow, but with wisdom." Elias followed his gaze. "You want to know if love has left? Then listen. Don't force her to speak. Don't demand clarity from someone unsure of their own heart. Just watch. The signs will come." The Watcher placed the leaf in Elias's palm. "And when they do, you won't need to ask. You'll already know." In that quiet clearing, surrounded by trees shedding what they no longer needed, Elias understood something he'd never wanted to believe. Love, like all things in nature, has its seasons. And when someone begins to fade from you, the world won't scream, it will whisper. Through silence, through small absences, through cold mornings that once were warm. What remains isn't the fight to keep love, but the strength to witness its change. And in the falling of those first leaves, two signs always appear. First sign, they no longer share their inner world. The days after Elias returned were quiet. Liana was there, cooking, cleaning, asking about the crops, but something essential was missing. Now that Elias knew how to listen, he heard it plainly. The silence between words, the lack of depth. Conversations that once meandered through dreams and fears were now functional, safe. She spoke like someone with nothing to hide, not out of secrecy, but absence. She simply stopped letting him in. He remembered evenings by the fire, talking for hours about everything and nothing. Now she answered with nods, shared only what was necessary. It wasn't hostility, it was retreat. One night Elias asked what had made her smile that day. She looked confused. "Nothing really," she replied. The room grew colder. It was like knocking on a door that once swung open, only to find it locked without explanation. When someone stops sharing their inner world, it's rarely because they're hiding something. Often it's because they no longer feel the need to bring you into their thoughts. The connection becomes one-sided. You keep reaching in, but nothing comes back. The Watcher called this the closing of the gate. He told Elias every person carries an inner garden, a place of memories, emotions, dreams. To love someone is to be invited into that garden. And when love fades, the first thing they do is close the gate, slowly, silently. They stop telling you about their day. They leave out details they once rushed to share. They no longer ask your opinion, not because they're hiding, but because your thoughts no longer matter to theirs. Elias saw it now. She had retreated behind walls that used to be transparent. She still smiled, still offered tea, but her joys, her sorrows, her small discoveries were no longer his to hold. The Stoic Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we can listen twice as much as we speak." But what happens when there's nothing left to hear? The answer is painful, but simple. You accept it. Stoicism teaches that suffering comes not from events, but from our judgments of them. When someone stops sharing, the pain isn't in the silence. It's in our expectation that they should speak. The truth? We don't own another's inner world. We're guests there. And when the invitation is withdrawn, the wise don't break down the door. They bow and walk away with dignity. Elias stopped asking questions met with indifference. He stopped straining for warmth where only routine remained. Instead, he observed. And in that observation, he found the truth. Not in what was said, but in what was no longer spoken. This is the first sign. When love fades, the heart's voice grows quiet. They no longer share their fears, their hopes, their soul. You're still in their life, but no longer in their thoughts. And once you're absent from someone's inner world, their outer actions will soon follow. The first leaf has fallen. The garden gate is closed. Second sign, they start comparing you, silently. It was late afternoon when Elias noticed it again. They walked through the village market as they always had, but now her eyes wandered. Not to the stalls, but to other people. He watched as her gaze lingered on a young couple laughing near the baker's shop. No envy, no sadness, just observation. As if she were looking at something once familiar, now distant. Later, she complimented another woman's dress, a passing comment, careless. But her tone made Elias feel measured against someone else, and found lacking. She never said a cruel word. Yet every glance away, every silent admiration of others cut deeper than criticism ever could. When someone falls out of love, they begin to compare. Not openly, but quietly. They notice what others have that you don't. They admire traits in strangers they once loved in you. They may not realize they're doing it, but you feel it. Laughter once shared grows muted. Habits once endearing now irritate. Your presence becomes less a comfort, more a benchmark. The Watcher had told Elias a story. A man once carved a statue of his wife, believing it perfect. Over time, he added features that weren't hers. A softer smile, straighter posture. He claimed it was still her, but it had become someone else. This is comparison. It replaces real connection with imagined perfection. It shifts focus from what's shared to what's missing, from gratitude to desire. And it always begins quietly. You'll see it in how they speak of others. In how their eyes brighten at strangers' stories, but dim when you speak. In the subtle distance they create when they start seeing you not as their choice, but their habit. Marcus Aurelius wrote, Be content to seem what you really are. But when someone is no longer content with you, their restlessness shows in glances, sighs, silence. Elias sensed it everywhere. She no longer reached for his hand in public, smiled more at others than at him, admired things he could never give her, without ever saying it aloud. There's a pain in being measured without being told. It's the ache of being seen but not cherished, of standing beside someone already imagining another. The Stoics teach us not to chase what we can't control. We can't stop someone from comparing us, but we can refuse to compare ourselves in return. Love built on comparison isn't love, it's performance. And we are not actors. When someone silently compares you, they stop seeing you as enough. They fixate on what you lack and forget what you are. This is the second sign. The heart has shifted. It looks outward, not inward. Elias didn't confront Liana. He didn't beg her to see him differently. He simply watched and saw a woman still present in body but already gone in spirit. Love begins with admiration, but it fades when that admiration wanders. And the cruelest part? It's not being replaced. It's being forgotten while still standing in front of the person you love. That's how the second leaf falls. Not with a word, not with a decision, but with a gaze that no longer sees you. What should you do when you see the signs? After days of watching, Elias returned to the forest. The watcher sat on the same bench, eyes on the same trees. "I've seen the signs," Elias said. "She no longer shares herself with me. She compares me to things I can't be. What do I do now?" The watcher picked up a handful of fallen leaves, letting them drift away. You can't chase the wind. You can't force a leaf to cling to a branch that no longer feeds it. Should I fight for her? Ask her to stay? The watcher shook his head. You can ask. You can cry. You can pour out every ache in your chest. But if her heart has already left, your words won't reach her. You'd be speaking to a memory, not the person before you. The Stoics remind us, true strength lies in accepting reality, not resisting it. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal, achieved by letting go of what we can't control." You can't control how someone feels. You can't force love to return. You can't make someone stay if their spirit has already left. But you can control something far more powerful, yourself. How? Elias asked. By not begging for attention, by not shrinking your worth to keep what no longer values it, by standing firm and choosing peace over pride. When someone begins to leave, don't chase them into the dark. Let them walk. If they return, let it be by choice, not guilt. If they don't, you'll still be standing, whole, undiminished. The greatest mistake is thinking that letting go means you didn't care. The opposite is true. Letting go means you cared enough not to trap what wanted to fly. So what do I do tomorrow? Elias asked. The watcher smiled. You rise, you tend your fields, you greet the sun, you care for your life, because it's still yours, even if someone has stepped out of it. Let them go, Elias, but do more than that. Choose yourself. Build a future that doesn't depend on another's heart. Because the one thing you must never lose is your own soul in the effort to keep someone else's love. That's Stoic strength, not coldness, courage. The courage to stay rooted when everything drifts away. The courage to walk forward even when the path beside you is empty. The strength in walking alone. Elias didn't return home with anger. He didn't demand answers or break the silence with accusations. He simply began to live differently. He still rose early, still worked his land, but there was a new stillness in him, a calm born not from certainty, but release. He no longer waited for her warmth, no longer searched her face for traces of the love they'd once shared. He accepted what was, and in that acceptance, something shifted. One morning he stood at the edge of his field. The season was changing again, the air colder, the trees barer. Yet the land was still alive. So was he. He caught his reflection in the window, not as a man left behind, but as one who'd chosen not to lose himself. Love doesn't always end. Sometimes it becomes a memory, sometimes a lesson, but it always leaves us changed. The Stoics taught that we own nothing in this life, not possessions, not people, not even the feelings we hope will last. All we have is this moment, the power to respond with reason, the strength to let go with grace. Elias learned that letting go wasn't weakness, it was the highest form of strength. It was trust, in life, in himself. Trust that what left him didn't define him. And in that quiet, he found something greater than closure. He found peace. He walked away, Not in sorrow, not in defeat, but in truth. Now I ask you, have you ever seen these signs in your own relationships? Have you felt the quiet withdrawal of someone who once let you into their inner world? Have you sensed the silent comparisons that whispered you were no longer enough? If so, you're not alone. We've all stood in that quiet place, wondering if holding on makes us loyal, or if letting go makes us wise. So I invite you to share your story. Reflect, write it down. By sharing, you don't just heal yourself, you help others find the strength to move forward. Tell us how you found the courage to let go, or how you're still learning to. Because wisdom isn't just hearing words, it's living them. It's passing them on so others can walk their path with clarity. Remember, love is never owned, it's lived, and sometimes it's honored most deeply by letting go. What are your views on this? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I will personally read all of your comments. And if you seriously want to level up in life, don't forget to show some love by hitting the like and subscribe button. Stay strong. Until next time.